Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on how to get started with digital work instructions in PICO. My name is Joyce Young, and I'm joined here today by Steve Wissaw, who's head of product for PICO. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. This is being recorded, so it'll be available on demand. Everybody is on mute. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please pop them into the Q&A function down below, and we'll make sure to answer questions as we go along. Without further ado, Steve, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Joyce. So to kick things off here, to get started, we want to talk about the decision we did to make our digital work instructions free. You can see some of the different evaluations here about, the upgrade paths of connecting tools and different technology stacks. But we made this choice because, a lot of factories are trying to capture tribal knowledge and standardize work instructions. And we want to make sure that tools like PowerPoint and other documentation is available for all users. We see almost double-digit percentage losses in efficiency from either sub-minute cycle times all the way up to several hours. So some work instructions, then worker guidance that capture information as we go and log it without having to worry about writing things down after you're done building it is very powerful. And that's why we want to enable everyone to be able to get started using the entry-level version of our software to be able to collect all this information. So today we're going to be walking through evaluating the entry of our package, and so you can get started using our digital work instructions for free. So a few things here included in this part of this basic plan, which we'll be covering in a demo in a little bit, are customizable digital work instructions. So we have the ability to have that step-by-step operator guidance, being able to bring in images, videos, different annotations to be able to support that type of structure for your operators. We also have a workflow management tool to create that kind of product workflow that's representing your workflow, and then being able to go in as an operator and start actually documenting and creating our build as we go. Again, I'll be demoing this about halfway through our session today, but this is kind of that high level of what you can expect to see over our free plan that we're offering. So to document some of the information that we've seen to get started, we have a testimonial here from Chris Stewart, a manufacturing engineer at Pollington. They're a machine shop in northern Michigan, an automotive contract manufacturer, and they migrated from paper to the digital work instructions with PICO to get that traceability. So I'm going to turn on this video here, and we can hear from Chris about his process of getting started.
I think something that holds a lot of employers back is fear of trying to implement something like this. They have relied so long on paperwork instructions. It's a comfort zone. And now suddenly going to digital, they worry, well, what if the employee doesn't look at it? We know there's a physical book here they can look at, they can follow along. I think for one thing, that any employer that is nervous about trying the digital work instructions is to just go for it. Give it a try. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's not like you can't go back to your books and continue to use those. You don't know until you try. And if you don't try, you won't know. I think something that holds a lot of...
Thanks, Chris. So a little bit of a background of our work instructions here. Again, you'll see this in just a minute, but I wanted to give a quick level overview of what you can expect to see as part of that worker guidance. The step-by-step instructions here imitate a slide sorter. So when we talk about that sequence of operations, we can see each of those individual steps or slides similar to what you would see in a PowerPoint session. All of your steps are listed sequentially into hyperlinks here, or additional contents of information. So if we're linking to additional content, installing other pieces of information or things that the operator needs to do, all of that's available as part of the work instructions here. This toolbar here, your annotations, lines, shapes, different colors, and text editing are all available here, of course, similar to those Microsoft Office or Google Slides tools, but we have those embedded directly into the platform so you can modify your work instructions on the fly. So there's a few fundamentals that are important to cover before we hop into the demo, just so we're all on the same page. Very similar to that real life factory, you need three things. One, a station where that work or that sequence of operations is performed. Two, a process that's that sequence of steps that must be followed. Whether it's you're assembling something, you're working a machine, or you're doing an inspection, there is some set of process to follow. Number three is, of course, someone doing that work. So when we have an operator, a technician, an inspector, a machinist at that station doing work, that is the person that's going to be documenting that standard work, reporting that information along the way. So again, PICO needs three things: a station, a process, and a person signed in at a specific station to be able to track across all of that work. So with that, I'm going to dive into our demo here to be able to talk about some of the interactivity of the platform. So this landing page here is my list of products. This bicycle is that example workflow that we'll be kind of walking through here. When I look into this bicycle, I can see a number of tiles. What these tiles indicate in PICO land are processes. Each one of these are a sequence of operations or steps that work is performed in. So when I have a wheel assembly, assembling a frame, attaching wheels, putting the seat post in, or calibrating those brake pads and making sure that distance is correct, I can always navigate through here appropriately and rearrange my tiles as I see fit. If I need to add in a new sequence, for example, if I need to, let's say, install some handlebars, I can simply create a new process. And it's created at the end of the flow, but instead of having to reorganize it in a table or name these as specific sequences in a routing, like you would in traditional ERP settings, I can drag this around to wherever I need it in my process. If I want to do it before seat post install, that implies that this process must be complete before that happens. If I have two operators doing this task at the same time, I can put this in parallel. So this indicates that these processes don't have to happen in sequence. As long as they're both done before the brake pad calibration is complete, I can continue in my instructions. You'll notice anytime I added something or I made a change here, the save button is up here on the upper right-hand corner. So anytime that I make a change in this process, it's logged as part of our change control and revision history, which I'll get to in just a minute. I'll jump into our specific process here of seat post install. This is where those work instructions live from our editing standpoint. When I have my content here of editing the serial number and logging that in as part of this process and installing that, I have the ability to come in and edit these images and layer on annotations as possible. So this is what a finished process potentially could look like. What I'm going to do is step back a minute and essentially recreate this process to give you an example of what that looks like. So if I wanted to create a new seat post install version 2, just as an example, when I go into this process, I'll hit save and continue. I have a blank set of instructions here. When I go in and add additional steps, I can scan that serial number and I can install that seat post. What's important here is that I can navigate to my design tab and essentially start from scratch or bring in previous steps as needed. But what I'm going to do here is to select from an album. So when I click this button, I have a variety of images to choose from that are all loaded into the server. I can always bring in additional images as necessary. But when I select my image, I can zoom in on my relevant data points or portions of my image that are most beneficial to my tracking here. So I'm just going to zoom in on this image, and traditional PowerPoint tools are going to say that I'm going to put an arrow here and point to this, and that's our typical work instruction guidance, which is, again, important, useful as part of our structure here. But what we can do, instead of having those arrows and images, we can say that we're going to have a numbered list here. And this first step is to scan that serial number of the frame or enter that serial number of the frame if we're manually typing that in, especially if we're only looking for those last 3 digits and that last character at the end. What I can do is highlight this text here as part of a best practice as our work instructions, layer in some content. So what I'm going to do is create a link to highlight a section of this main image. So what I'm going to do is the serial number of the frame, I'm going to highlight exactly what I want to scan or enter, which are these last three digits with that character on the end here as well. So anytime I'm an operator and I select, let me scan that serial number, it's going to select this section of the image for me, and I'll show what that looks like in the work instruction shortly. The same concept applies for entering in that information. What I'm going to do is enter in a serial number, or if I have a scanner connected as part of our essential package, I can certainly do so. This is the frame serial number. Our expected pattern is either a regex pattern or a simple code of processes to make sure that we're entering in that right information. I want to make sure it's unique and indicate that this is the thing I'm building, which is called the process serial number. And I can say that this is assigned to a specific thing. You'll notice as part of that action configuration that this process isn't assigned to a station. So now it's actually a good time to take a step back and look at our station page. As I mentioned, as part of that PICO infrastructure, we have processes, stations, and people. The stations page here is exactly where all of those digital representations of those physical stations live. So I have a test station, a brake pad calibration here. What I'm going to do is add a new station here. As part of your base deployment, you'll have a test station available to you to build at, but you'll always be able to create your own stations, what I'm doing here. So when I come in here to add a station, what I'm going to do is just call this the seat post install station. And if I need to, I can add those processes directly from this page here. And what that essentially means is at this process, I have a variety of different options to build at. So if I assign a process to the station, I can see all of the different processes available to build at my particular station. So I can select multiple. If I want to assemble the frame here and put the wheels, I can certainly do that as well. For now, I'm just going to create the seat post install V2 for our demonstration purposes here and assign that to the station. If I navigate back to my process here, my seat post install V2, I can also configure that from my process page. So if I'm creating a process, I can always assign this to multiple stations from the process page as well. You can do it from both ways just to manage your workflows accordingly. I'm going to jump back into my seat post install process here. I'm going to just create another step in my process just to add some more annotations and images here. So let's say from a workflow standpoint, I'm going to install seats, and then I'll keep it simple here, and then tighten the 4 set screws in place. And what that does is essentially allow me to put an annotation on those 4 set screws. So I'll make it in yellow so it's nice and easy for us to see that I'm going to put these annotations and numbers on here. And if I copy these, it'll populate those numbers for me as well. If I want to add on a label of what that serial number of that seat post looks like for more data entry, I can put the seat serial number in the very same way that it's a number. And if it's, go back here, that this is the seat serial number. And if I have this as just any 5-digit number, I can put it in a simple regex pattern and make sure that's unique as well. And here I'm just going to be manually entering that information. I can also add in additional annotations, put more images if I need to call out different part numbers as needed. But in this case, I'm just going to quickly move on and deploy this into production. So when we start deploying this, now we have both of our actions configured for manual entries. This allows us to get started building in our station. And I mentioned change control earlier. What that functionally looks like is this new, this tab over here on the side called change control that allows us to see all of our newly created processes. If I navigate to my station, I won't be able to build these until they're committed and approved and deployed to production. This allows us to modify our work instructions and manually and automatically control our flow of information to the shop floor. So I can see my new processes here. I can create my new station as part of the essential path. We can create approval processes to match your approval sequence. Let's say you want someone from design engineering to approve it, then someone from manufacturing engineering, and maybe from material handling. Before it goes live on the production floor, we can have those relevant parties approve it. In this case, I'm just going to deploy it to production and allows me to start building on my production floor. So within my settings menu, because I'm navigating from my laptop here, I'm going to go to settings and observe my build screen, which allows me to select from my different stations I have available on the production floor. I can see my newly created seat post install station here, which prompts me to start building at my station here. As an operator, when I'm signing in for the first time, I can authenticate via an email or a PIN login, or have my manager sign in and toggle the station on for me. But this essentially allows me to start building at my station with all the different processes I have. So when I start building here, I can see some of that interactivity in those actions. What's important as part of that traceability, I can't go forward in my instructions until I've successfully completed all of my actions that I put on my page, which enforces my traceability and makes sure I'm scanning the right thing. Some of that interactivity that I mentioned, if I toggle this or if I click on this as an operator, it's going to highlight exactly what I'm trying to enter so I can keep that clear for my operators. I'm going to save that and continue. The same concept here. I can see my information. If I enter in something that is a wrong serial number, for example, it's going to reject that pattern and force me to put in the correct serial number for my seat post. As soon as I'm done building, I get a quick summary of everything that I captured. It prompts me to start building something new or start something back on my process selection screen. Now that I've completed building that, I'm going to go to my process page to show that collected data. So again, on this process page, I can see my design tab. I can see my data collected and other things associated with it. So now I have my first build in here with serial number 138R. I know who built it, which station they built it at, and all of those timestamps associated with that build. So not only the start time, but each step's cycle time down to 1/10 of a second. I can see my frame serial number and that seat serial number of what I installed on there. So in the matter of 10 minutes, I can create some work instructions and start building out on the floor and make sure my operators can jump in quickly whenever I start building. A couple of things to note on top of that is some analytics content. Of course, there's only one build here, but I can see my builds over time of how many have I built, what's my median build time. My stretch build time is my 90th percentile achievable operator. So when I start talking about, how am I building and how am I progressing through my builds, I can see my continuous improvement over time. As part of the base work instructions, you can see your last 7 days of information. As the upgrade to the essential, you can start looking at all your whole historical builds as needed. The same concept applies to our data page here, that I can see the full build history as needed week over week as part of that essential package to see exactly how many of these items did I build over time and what was my average build time associated with those. Important for traceability, the last thing I want to mention as part of the demo here is being able to search by serial number or manufacturing order. So if I look at that bicycle frame assembly that I built and I enter that serial number, I'll be able to see all the historical builds associated with it. Again, by when it was started, when it was completed, what version of that process it was built on, and everything associated with it as needed. If I need to go to that calibration process where it already went through, for example, I can navigate directly to that data page here and look exactly to see how that works in any collected information. So if I want to know how far apart those brake pads are, I can easily come in here and see all of that captured information according to those actions for every step in my process here. So I'm going to jump back to our presentation here to talk about some examples that we've seen across our customer base to be able to get started with PICO here. So, that basic, as we talked about, is ideal for starting your digitization journey. You want to capture some work instructions and start managing your workflows and working through that content as needed. A good example, we heard from Chris at Paulington, essentially that upgrade path of Essential secures that, that tier 1 auto contract, and that traceability becomes a necessity for their safe launch. All of these case studies I mentioned here are available on our website, and you have the ability to look at these with more information. But these are good examples of that path forward as we start talking about what are my next steps and best practices of getting PICO launched. So as part of that essential package that Pollington saw, you can see that standard work across your factory, and you can upgrade that full data traceability and all the analytics needed to start monitoring and managing the business. The next level on top of that is our professional, which connects stations through connected tools. So PICO's got hundreds of different types of tools and thousands of different models to be able to start collecting that information directly from that equipment. So you saw in the demo that I was manually entering in information. When we start connecting the tools, we can receive that input directly to help error-proof those assemblies and data entry points. A good example of that is our case study with Moride. They've got over 125 different devices integrated in PICO, and they've fully error-proofed their chassis assembly line to be able to make sure they're not having any warranty issues or fallout in the field. So when we talk about going from that crawl, walk, run journey of starting your factory with digital work instructions, start managing your business, you can truly start poke-yoking and error-proofing your process to be able to manage those defects. Lastly, a good example of that enterprise fully connected factory is a case study with Tritium. Again, started with those paperwork instructions, converted and integrated tools, and have managed their factory accordingly. So it's a number of custom integrations and managing that tech stack. So just across 4 months at Tritium, they reduced operator onboarding from 2 months to 2 weeks, just using that basic level platform. They started tracking all of their traceability for their DC fast chargers and tracking the traceability required from all the compliance and regulations. And because of all the torque fastening tools, air leak testers, and end-of-line testers, they have that professional connected station as well. So when they receive work orders from their ERP, they manage their rework and ticketing across their quality systems. They can receive all of that directly from their factory operations platform of PICO. So if you're interested in taking some next steps here, the best place to start would be signing up for your free version of digital work instructions and worker guidance on our website, which is listed here at picomes.com/try for free. All these onboarding videos and the walkthrough I did are available in smaller chunks to manage some of those specific actions to help you get started. And of course, we're always available at help@picomes.com. So I think now's a great time to answer some of those questions that came in.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steve. For everyone that's tuning in, if you could drop your questions into the Q&A chat box down below, we'll get started. We have a lot of questions, Steve. The first one is from Jamie. Alongside optimizing work instructions, what is the next logical step in maximizing productivity?
Yeah, once you've kind of set those work instructions, the best way to start along that journey is managing that standard work. That there's best practices across your operators, and you need to leverage some of those learnings across the entire facility. So once you've kind of set your initial work instructions, it's always good to think of that as revision 0 or revision 1, because there's always tips and tricks from specific operators that need to be leveraged across the entire facility. It's very challenging to get 5, 10, 15% productivity improvements across the way. But when you start managing those and seeing which operators are more successful across those analytics and business intelligence tools, you can really start managing your workflow, even what you have today. There's no connected tools required. There's no big fancy spending. It is all just managing your workforce and helping their best practices and standard work across everyone that's doing those tasks. And then from there, of course, when you really want to start error proofing, using those connected torque tools to make sure that everyone's fastening that joint according to spec in the same way, whether it's a torque tool, traceable scan items, air leak testers, high pod testers for electricity measurements. There's all sorts of ways to make sure that you're managing your process and that you're helping your operators bring that, good 97, 98% of the time, all the way up to 100%, making sure they have the tools to be successful.
Here's another really good one. I'm using PowerPoint work instructions today. How long will it take to migrate that into PICO?
Yeah, great question. It's no surprise that PowerPoint's a very popular and common tool that we see available here. There's some great tools within PowerPoint to essentially export all of those into individual PICO slides. And typically speaking, we see having something from however long it takes you to build that PowerPoint instruction. It's typically about 8 times faster to build that within PICO. So depending on how complex your instructions are, you can reduce it by about an eighth of the time, and that's what it'll take to get it into PICO. Generally speaking, there's some great exporting and importing capabilities to get all of those images and annotations directly into PICO, but it's a very light lift to get started.
Excellent. Sarah wants to know, for the free plan, are there any limits to the number of users, stations, or processes?
Yeah, great question. So there are some limits on the free plan just to enable the entry level point of helping small factories on their digitization journey. Right now, we're limited to 10 operators, 10 stations, and 150 processes to be able to support this. You can always upgrade to a site license as part of the essential, which immediately brings you to the unlimited users and unlimited stations and processes variety. So there's a very, very quick entry into unlocking the entire availability of PICO.
Excellent. Tom wants to know, is the free digital work instructions only available with a cloud deployment?
Good question. The free version of PICO is only available with a cloud deployment. We do offer an upgrade path to basically on-premise locations on our hardware as part of that essential package. The server comes as a black box, pre-provisioned with everything you need to get started. It's great for those ITAR type facilities or locations that need to be a little bit more secure from the cloud environment. But with that upgrade path, you can get started in that direction.
And I'll ask one more one. Do you have a favorite feature or hidden gem that you can share about PICO?
Yeah, my favorite feature of PICO is managing your workflows using that kind of drag and drop interface that I walked through, because I've had a lot of experience of managing ERPs and routings, and things are locked in. The sequence gets pretty convoluted, and enforcing that you must do this before you can start this next process. But with PICO, it's either implied from the workflow or managed with a check of a button that says, this is the workflow I want, and you must do it in this order. And enforcing that process is very, very simple and straightforward, and a lot easier than just a piece of paper that travels along with the parts on the shop floor.
Excellent. We got to all the questions today. For those of you who are tuning in and will watch this on demand, if you have any more questions, feel free to send them to help@picomes.com. We'll make sure to address them then. That concludes today's webinar. Please hang on. There'll be a quick 2-question survey just asking you about how we can get better and provide more information, more education to you. That's all for now. Thank you.